At the bachelor party, my best friend pulled me aside. I slept with her. I didn't know she was your fiancé. He left crying. I left the ring in her champagne glass. The cathedral bells of St. Augustine's rang across downtown as I adjusted my tie one final time before heading to what should have been the celebration of my lifetime. 3 weeks before my wedding to Victoria, my childhood friend Thomas had organized a bachelor party to end all bachelor parties. The venue was his family's estate outside the city, complete with a private chef, vintage whiskey collection, and enough entertainment to last until dawn. The sprawling mansion sat on 40 acres of manicured grounds, with gardens that had been featured in architectural magazines and a wine cellar that housed bottles dating back to the 19th century. Victoria and I had been together for 4 years, meeting during our graduate programs at the university where she studied forensic accounting while I pursued my degree in corporate security. She worked as a forensic accountant for the district attorney's office, specializing in white-collar crime investigations that required meticulous attention to detail and analytical thinking. Her sharp intellect and dedication to justice had initially attracted me, though lately those same qualities seemed to create distance between us as she became increasingly absorbed in complex cases involving financial fraud and corporate corruption. The bachelor party guest list read like a reunion of my entire social circle spanning 2 decades of friendships and professional relationships. Thomas had invited college roommates who had traveled from across the country, work colleagues from my corporate security firm, fraternity brothers who still gathered annually for football games, and even my cousin Derek who flew in from Seattle specifically for the occasion. The guest list totaled 23 men, each representing a different chapter of my life and testament to the bonds of friendship that had sustained me through various challenges and achievements. As we gathered in the grand salon of the estate, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and masculine camaraderie that reminded me of our college years when such gatherings were weekly occurrences rather than special occasions. The bartender mixed elaborate cocktails using premium spirits from Thomas's personal collection, while the chef prepared a 7-course meal featuring locally sourced ingredients and wine pairings that would have impressed any food critic. The evening began with cigars on the terrace overlooking the estate's private lake, followed by storytelling sessions that chronicled our shared adventures from adolescence through adulthood. Thomas pulled me aside during the cocktail hour, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something I had never witnessed in our 20-year friendship. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his whiskey glass, and his eyes darted around the room, avoiding direct contact with mine, while sweat formed on his forehead, despite the comfortable temperature. The man who had been my best friend since elementary school, who had stood by me through every major life decision, including career changes and family crises, suddenly appeared to be carrying the weight of an enormous secret that was destroying him from within. The evening progressed with toasts celebrating our friendship and stories from our shared past, including embarrassing college incidents and professional achievements that had shaped our adult lives. However, Thomas remained unusually quiet throughout the festivities, contributing only forced laughter to conversations and declining to participate in the group activities that typically brought out his natural leadership qualities. When the other guests moved to the billiards room for tournament-style competitions, he approached me again with the same nervous energy that had characterized his behavior throughout the evening. The mansion's library provided the perfect setting for what would become the most devastating conversation of my life. Oak bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with first-edition volumes and leather-bound classics that had been collected by Thomas's family over several generations. The room smelled of aged paper and wood polish, creating an atmosphere of gravitas that seemed appropriate for whatever revelation was about to unfold. As Thomas closed the heavy wooden doors behind us, isolating us from the laughter and celebration echoing through the rest of the mansion, I sensed that our friendship was about to be forever altered by whatever he needed to confess. Thomas began his revelation with words that would haunt my dreams for years to come, his voice barely above a whisper as he struggled to find the courage to destroy everything I believed about the people closest to me. 6 months earlier, during a forensic accounting conference in Chicago, he had attended as a representative of his investment firm, while Victoria was there presenting a case study on corporate fraud detection techniques. Neither had mentioned to me that they would both be attending the same professional conference, a detail that now seemed deliberately concealed rather than merely overlooked in our casual conversations about work-related travel. The conference lasted 3 days at the Palmer House Hotel, and according to Thomas's painful confession, they had encountered each other at the hotel bar on the first evening following Victoria's successful presentation to a room full of prosecutors and financial investigators. Victoria had been celebrating her professional triumph with colleagues while Thomas was drowning his sorrows over a failed business deal that had cost his firm several $1 million in potential revenue. One drink led to another as they commiserated about their respective professional pressures, and before either of them claimed to realize the implications, they found themselves in her hotel room engaging in the ultimate betrayal of our friendship and relationship. Thomas described the encounter with excruciating detail that I simultaneously wanted to hear and forget, explaining how Victoria had initiated the physical contact by placing her hand on his arm during their conversation about workplace stress and professional disappointments. He emphasized how his judgment became clouded by alcohol and the intoxicating opportunity to be with a woman he had secretly desired since meeting her years earlier. The betrayal extended beyond a single night of weakness, as they had maintained contact through encrypted messaging applications for several weeks afterward, sharing intimate photographs and planning future encounters with the same methodical approach Victoria applied to her financial investigations. What made the revelation even more devastating was Thomas's admission that Victoria had not immediately disclosed her engagement to me during their initial encounter at the hotel bar. She had deliberately removed her engagement ring before approaching him and had presented herself as single throughout their extended conversation and subsequent intimate encounter. Only during their post-encounter conversation the following morning did she reveal the truth about our relationship, leading to what Thomas described as the most uncomfortable and guilt-ridden morning of his entire life, though not uncomfortable enough to prevent future meetings. The timeline of events began to align with subtle changes I had noticed in Victoria's behavior following her return from the Chicago conference, changes that I had attributed to work stress rather than personal guilt. She had become more distant and irritable, often working late nights and weekend hours that seemed excessive even for her demanding position at the district attorney's office. Her phone had become a constant companion that she guarded jealously, and she would excuse herself to take calls that she claimed were work-related, but now seemed far more suspicious given Thomas's detailed confession about their ongoing communication. Thomas's revelation included disturbing details about their continued correspondence, which involved not only personal messages expressing their mutual attraction, but also the sharing of intimate photographs and detailed plans for future secret meetings in various cities where they could maintain their affair without detection. The depth of their ongoing relationship extended far beyond a single night of poor judgment and represented a sustained pattern of deception that had continued right up until my bachelor party weekend. The man I trusted most in the world had been systematically destroying my life while maintaining the facade of friendship and support, even helping me select the engagement ring that Victoria had been removing to facilitate their encounters. The most painful aspect of Thomas's confession was his description of how Victoria had shared intimate details about our relationship during their private conversations, including my personal habits, insecurities, and even details about our intimate life that she had no right to discuss with anyone. They had laughed together about my obliviousness to their affair and had developed inside jokes about my trusting nature, treating my loyalty and devotion as sources of amusement rather than qualities worthy of respect. The woman I planned to marry and the friend I considered a brother had been mocking me behind my back while I remained completely unaware of their betrayal. My initial shock and emotional devastation quickly transformed into a methodical need to understand the complete scope of their deception, drawing upon skills learned during my corporate security training to conduct a thorough investigation into Victoria's activities during the months following the Chicago conference. Thomas had provided enough specific details about their communications and meeting locations that I knew exactly where to look for evidence of their ongoing affair, and my background in digital forensics would prove invaluable in uncovering the truth they had worked so carefully to conceal. Victoria's laptop contained a hidden partition protected by encryption software that she likely assumed I would never discover, but her password security was surprisingly weak for someone who investigated financial crimes professionally. Within that partition were thousands of messages exchanged through various encrypted platforms, including Signal, Telegram, and WhatsApp, along with photographs and videos that documented their relationship in explicit detail spanning the entire duration of their affair. The evidence revealed not a moment of weakness followed by regret, but a calculated ongoing relationship that had been carefully orchestrated to avoid detection while maintaining our engagement and wedding plans. The messaging history revealed discussions that went far beyond romantic communication, including detailed conversations about my personal habits, financial situation, career prospects, and even intimate details about our relationship that Victoria had shared with Thomas in violation of every boundary of trust and privacy. They had analyzed my daily routines to identify optimal times for their communications and meetings, discussed my travel schedule to plan their encounters, and even shared strategies for deflecting my suspicions when their behavior seemed unusual or suspicious. Further investigation revealed that Victoria had been using her position at the district attorney's office to conduct unauthorized background checks on Thomas's business associates, providing him with insider information about pending investigations and regulatory actions that gave his investment firm unfair advantages in several major deals. Their relationship had evolved beyond personal betrayal into professional corruption that could have serious legal consequences for both of them if discovered by the proper authorities, representing a level of ethical violation that went far beyond their personal infidelity. The digital paper trail extended to hotel reservations made through third-party booking sites to avoid detection, restaurant charges at establishments across 3 different cities, and travel arrangements that coincided with days when Victoria claimed to be attending professional conferences or working overtime on urgent cases. Credit card statements revealed purchases of lingerie, jewelry, and gifts that had never appeared in our home, indicating that she was maintaining a completely separate romantic life with Thomas while actively planning our wedding and discussing our future together. The most disturbing discovery was a series of recorded phone conversations between Victoria and Thomas that had been automatically saved to a cloud backup service she had forgotten about. These recordings revealed discussions about their long-term plans for continuing their affair indefinitely, including detailed strategies for maintaining their relationship even after our marriage. They had developed contingency plans for various scenarios, including the possibility of eventually manipulating me into a divorce so they could be together publicly without the complications of maintaining their secret relationship. The level of premeditation and calculation involved in their deception exceeded anything I could have imagined from people I thought I knew intimately. They had created detailed schedules for their communications, established protocols for emergency contact situations, and even discussed the possibility of relocating to other cities where they could be together without the complications of their existing relationships and professional obligations. The evidence painted a picture of 2 people who had invested enormous time and energy into building a parallel life together while maintaining elaborate facades in their public relationships. Armed with irrefutable evidence of their systematic betrayal, I made the calculated decision to confront Victoria during our wedding rehearsal dinner, choosing the moment for maximum impact, while avoiding the public humiliation that would devastate our families and friends who had gathered to celebrate what they believed would be the beginning of our happy marriage. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, the same location where we had celebrated our engagement 2 years earlier, surrounded by family members who had traveled from across the country and friends who had known us throughout our relationship. Victoria arrived at the rehearsal dinner wearing the elegant white dress we had selected together for the occasion during a shopping trip that now seemed like a painful memory of happier times when I believed in the authenticity of our relationship. Her smile was radiant as she moved through the crowd greeting our guests with the practiced performance of a devoted fiancé, accepting congratulations and well wishes from people who had no idea they were witnessing the final act of an elaborate deception that had consumed months of careful planning and execution. The evening proceeded with all the traditional elements of a rehearsal dinner, including heartfelt toasts from family members who spoke about our relationship with genuine affection and optimism for our future together. My father delivered an emotional speech about finding true love and building a life partnership based on trust and mutual respect, words that felt like knives twisting in my chest given what I now knew about Victoria's capacity for deception and betrayal. Her own parents spoke about how happy they were to welcome me into their family, expressing gratitude for the joy and stability I had brought to their daughter's life. I waited until the formal toasting portion of the evening reached its conclusion before making my move, timing my approach to coincide with the moment when Victoria raised her champagne glass to acknowledge the kind words that had been spoken about our relationship and future together. As she stood before our assembled families and friends, basking in their approval and affection, I approached her table carrying a manila folder containing printed copies of their messages, photographs, and financial records that documented the complete scope of their affair. The moment Victoria's eyes focused on the contents of that folder, her face transformed from radiant joy to absolute terror in a matter of seconds. The champagne glass trembled in her hand as she realized that her carefully constructed double life had been completely exposed, and all the evidence of her betrayal was now in my possession. Her breathing became shallow and rapid as she flipped through page after page of incriminating evidence, each document representing another nail in the coffin of our relationship and her professional reputation. Rather than create a public scene that would devastate our families and humiliate our guests, I quietly removed my engagement ring and dropped it into her champagne glass, where it sank to the bottom with a soft clink that only she could hear. The symbolism was deliberate and unmistakable. Our engagement was dissolving just as surely as the ring was disappearing into the champagne that had been meant to celebrate our upcoming union. I whispered that our conversation would continue privately after the dinner concluded, giving her the opportunity to maintain her composure for the remainder of the evening. Victoria's attempts to continue her performance throughout the rest of the rehearsal dinner were painful to watch, as those who knew her well could see the strain beginning to show through her increasingly desperate efforts to appear normal. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she signed the guest book. Her laughter became forced and hollow when responding to continued congratulations from unsuspecting relatives, and she excused herself multiple times to the restroom, where I later learned she had been frantically calling Thomas to warn him about the impending confrontation. The private confrontation that followed the rehearsal dinner lasted until dawn and involved not only Victoria but also Thomas, who arrived at the hotel within an hour after receiving a panic call from her describing the situation. The three of us spent the entire night in a hotel suite going through every piece of evidence I had compiled, with both of them attempting various forms of denial, justification, and desperate pleading for forgiveness that fell on deaf ears hardened by months of systematic deception. Thomas attempted to minimize his role by claiming that Victoria had pursued him aggressively and that he had been a victim of her manipulation, while Victoria countered by insisting that their affair had been primarily emotional rather than physical, and that she had never stopped loving me despite her relationship with Thomas. Both strategies were undermined by the extensive evidence of their enthusiastic participation in planning and executing their betrayal, including explicit messages that contradicted their attempts to downplay the significance of their relationship. The immediate consequences of their exposed affair began unfolding within days of the canceled wedding. Victoria's use of her position at the district attorney's office for personal gain triggered an internal investigation that quickly escalated into criminal charges for abuse of public office and violation of confidentiality laws. The evidence I had gathered proved instrumental in documenting her professional misconduct, leading to her suspension from the Bar Association and eventual disbarment proceedings that ended her legal career permanently. Thomas's investment firm faced regulatory scrutiny from multiple agencies after authorities discovered his use of insider information provided by Victoria to gain unfair advantages in several major investment deals. The investigation revealed other questionable practices within his firm, including conflicts of interest and violations of fiduciary duty that resulted in significant financial penalties and the eventual dissolution of his business. His professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair, and he faced personal bankruptcy as legal fees and regulatory fines consumed his assets. The personal aftermath proved equally devastating for both participants in the affair. Their relationship, which had been built on the excitement of deception and betrayal, could not survive the harsh light of public exposure and the stress of legal consequences. Within 6 months of the canceled wedding, they had ended their affair acrimoniously and were no longer speaking to each other, each blaming the other for the destruction of their respective lives and careers while accepting no responsibility for their own choices. Victoria ultimately relocated to a small town in Montana where she works as a bookkeeper for a local accounting firm, her legal career permanently destroyed and her personal reputation in shambles. The criminal conviction that followed her professional misconduct included substantial fines, community service requirements, and a permanent criminal record that prevented her from obtaining professional licenses in her field. Thomas declared bankruptcy and moved back in with his elderly parents while attempting to rebuild his life from the ground up, taking a job as a sales associate at a retail electronics store. The wedding cancellation required extensive logistical coordination, including notifying over 200 guests, canceling vendor contracts, and dealing with non-refundable deposits for services ranging from catering to photography. The financial loss exceeded $30,000. But the emotional cost of discovering the depth of their betrayal overshadowed any monetary concerns. Family members and friends struggled to understand how two people they had trusted and respected could maintain such an elaborate deception for such an extended period while appearing genuinely committed to their relationships and responsibilities. My own recovery from the betrayal required professional counseling and a complete reevaluation of my ability to trust others, leading to months of therapy sessions focused on rebuilding my capacity for intimate relationships and learning to recognize warning signs of deception that I had previously overlooked. The experience fundamentally changed my perspective on human nature and the importance of vigilance even in the closest relationships, teaching me valuable lessons about the need to verify rather than simply trust even those who appear most trustworthy. The investigation skills I developed while uncovering their affair sparked a career change that led me to leave corporate security and establish a private investigation firm specializing in infidelity cases and background checks for individuals and businesses. The experience provided me with unique insights into the psychology of deception and the methods people use to conceal their true activities from those closest to them. Expertise that has proven valuable in helping other victims of betrayal find the truth about their relationships. Years later, both Victoria and Thomas made multiple attempts to contact me through various means, seeking forgiveness and attempting to provide explanations or apologies for their actions. Victoria sent letters describing her regret and explaining the emotional factors that had led to her poor decisions, while Thomas made several attempts to restore our friendship by reaching out through mutual acquaintances and social media platforms. All such communications went unanswered, as the foundation of trust that had sustained our relationships could never be repaired after such fundamental and sustained betrayal. The story serves as a cautionary reminder that even the people we trust most completely are capable of elaborate deception and betrayal when their personal desires conflict with their obligations to others. The warning signs of their affair had been present throughout the months leading up to my wedding, but my complete faith in both Victoria and Thomas had prevented me from recognizing the behavioral patterns that should have raised immediate suspicions about their activities and relationship. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.